This 80-year-old Harvard study claimed to have found the key to happiness. Happiness is one of those unquantifiable things. People think it's a feeling and it's so hard to pin down, but they've actually done it. In a study that took over 80 years, they took qualitative and quantitative data, analyzed it all together, and figured out what actually makes people happy. So many people think it's like, oh, once I have more money, I'll be happy. Or once this happens, I'll be happy. But that's just not how it works. This book made its priority to debunk all of those things, to really show the human race and the human population what is going to make them feel fulfilled or what's going to make them feel happy. So if you want to be happier, this is for you. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about pretty much the basis of the book, how it was written, kind of all of that jazz. And then the second is I am going to pretty much give my review on how it was really constructed, how the wording was, and all of that stuff. So like how we start every video, glory be to God and our Lord Jesus Christ. I'm Jmac, and I like books. Now let's get into it. So The Good Life was authored by Dr. Waldinger and Dr. Schultz in 2023. Dr. Waldinger is a practicing psychiatrist, professor of psychiatry at Harvard University, a Zen master, and the director of the Harvard Study of Adult Development. Dr. Schultz is a professor of psychology, director of data science at Bryn Mawr College, and the associate director of the Harvard Study of Adult Development. Both men are extremely impressive, but the fact that they are the director and associate director of the Harvard Study of Adult Development is what's important for this book. The Harvard study, designed by Arlie Brock, was and probably is still the most famous longitudinal study ever recorded. It is the longest study ever done and conducted. Starting in the Great Depression, Brock, the study's founder, took 268 Harvard sophomores and 456 inner Boston boys and just track their lives. A lot of the studies at the time focused on what made people sick or what was detrimental to people. Brock wanted to look at what actually made people thrive, what made them succeed. He took the Harvard boys, who almost had the red carpet laid out for them supposedly, and he wanted to see what was going to make them thrive. And he also looked for the Boston boys, the inner city Boston boys, who were staying out of trouble in one of America's most troublesome neighborhoods, and he wanted to see how they would end up and why they were staying out of trouble. So what Brock and the Harvard study did over a span of an entire lifetime for these boys is they gave questionnaires, they tracked their biomarkers, and they did everything humanly possible to see what made them tick. They had conversations one-on-one, they had mailed-in questionnaires. They've done everything they possibly could to encapsulate these boys and young men's lives. This is pretty cool. It's awesome that you could track so many people over a whole lifetime. But I mentioned this is an 80-year study, and it spanned actually over 3 generations. So not only did they track the boys, they tracked their spouses and their children and their children's children. It is the longest longitudinal study almost ever recorded, and it is pretty sweet, I gotta admit. From a scientific perspective, it is almost unheard of. So they've talked and tracked these people throughout their entire lives. They compiled all of this data, and they came to one conclusion. What is it? The entire essence of the book is good relationships keep us happier, healthier, and help us live longer. I'm extroverted when I'm around people, but left to my own devices, I tend to kind of close up and just enjoy curling up with a book or kind of being by myself. And reading this book really transformed how I view relationships with people, because they've gone through all of these people. The proof is in the pudding. It is in the qualitative and quantitative data that being around other people, having good relationships, they don't have to be super strong. Everyone doesn't need to be your best friend, but relationships are an integral part of our lives. The book makes a great point where it says that a lot of this stems from an evolutionary perspective, where as people, in order for us to survive, we had to band together and cooperate. And if you haven't noticed, modern day is not really conducive to that type of thinking. When we can hide behind our phones, or we can DoorDash, or we can do pretty much anything else other than interacting with people one-on-one, we are losing that sense of community. The book points out another aspect of this whole situation that we really need to stop and think of. So right now, me talking to you, we are forming a relationship. It is not necessarily strong, but through the use of technology, me being a completely opposite side of potentially the world or the country or whatever, in my room alone, potentially with you in your room alone, we are able to connect. But a lot of times people use technology as a way to isolate themselves, or they create divisions in relationships. So technology can be good or bad. And this is one of those things that directly goes against our biology and our evolutionary track. But even speaking from a practical sense, the claim makes a lot of sense. You know, the old adage, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Or how many times have you heard success stories? It's like, I was going down a really bad path, or I was really struggling, and then so-and-so came to my life and turned everything around. You hear it all the time, but no one makes that connection that it's other people that a lot of times impact us the most. Fiction books, nonfiction books, all of these types of books have made this claim before. But now what's made this book so special is that there's evidence backing it. There are quantitative and qualitative, I know I've said it a lot, but we've gone through people's lives, their subjective views. We've seen their biomarkers. We've seen all of them thrive and or crash and burn. And through all of these people, 80 years worth, 3 generations, that is the claim that they came with, is that other people, those relationships, is what make us thrive. Now, don't worry, I'm not spoiling the book. There's a lot more in this, more about how to strengthen relationships, how to remove relationships that are taking energy away from you. But the central theme is said within the first couple of pages because it is so important. And I think that's what Waldinger and Schultz do an amazing job of, is they're really pulling the essence of the study and compounding it into under 300 pages. Now that you know the gist, let's talk about the actual book writing, the actual meat and potatoes of the literary elements. As far as the actual book writing piece goes, I was simultaneously a fan and not a fan. So I was a fan in the fact that they were able to deconstruct the complexity of a longitudinal study in a way that is accessible for someone that's not in science. Now, I am in science, so I could have cut through a lot of the jargon. However, for a lot of people that couldn't, it is still very accessible. And the way they did this is they pretty much went by everyone's personal experience, or they've gone through a lot of individual cases. Now, this is great because it made the data and the message a lot more relatable and a lot more accessible. However, it did come off as repetitive. Now, I know why they did this, and I'm not blaming them for it. It just, from a flow perspective of a book, it wasn't my favorite. Every claim they made, they had scientific evidence to back it up, which is great. But sometimes it felt like it was almost on a tangent, or it kind of delved too much into the nitty-gritty. While it is supposed to be a scientific study, they did a good job of turning it into a narrative, but I think they focused on certain portions at the wrong time. My biggest critique of the book was that repetitive piece, where I understand we were going back to certain people and going through their lives, and they were great case studies and great markers for the points that they were trying to make. However, when you have a 300-page book and you have the claim within the first 20 pages, and then you kind of regurgitate a lot of the same message within almost the same format, it becomes a little cumbersome to kind of get through. This book took me a little bit to get through. The actual writing was well done, albeit a little analytical, which I'm not surprised, and this is that type of book for it because it is nonfiction written by 2 doctors. There's not going to be a lot of fancy language from a stylistic standpoint outside of medical terminology in this book, but for what it was, they did a good job of explaining it, turning it into a narrative. It's very hard to take data and make it into a story. The citations that they used were correct throughout the entire time. The entire back half of citations were probably almost like 20 pages. So in terms of accuracy, of course, they did their due diligence and it was done very well. It was written in 2023, so they've used data in the past and the recent, so that was great. But I just think at certain points, the book went on for too long. That's my main critique. That's my main point or gripe with it. I really enjoyed how they were able to incorporate actual strategies to improve what they were trying to say or to really hammer home the message. Overall, I would probably give this 6.5 out of 10. I think the accessibility and the message really carried the book. I just think the repetitiveness and the cumbersome nature of it, where it just kind of took me a while to get through and not really want to keep turning pages the way other nonfiction books or potentially fiction books do for me. So I think that's what kind of brought the score down. But I think 6.5 is a very good score. Made one of the most influential books that I carry with me in the back of my head from all of my personal interactions. So in that part, it's been absolutely amazing because it does truly change my life and how I look at things. But from the actual reading experience, I wasn't super happy. But with that being said, for how dense the topic is, for how broad the topic is, for how much scientific jargon there could have been, the accessibility was amazing. And so to wrap this up with my personal message, they've done the science. Other books have preached the same thing. Other people are so important. How we relate to other people, how we view other people, how we view ourselves. Those relationships that we have interpersonally and intrapersonally are so crucial that they directly affect how we live our lives, how we feel about our lives, all of those types of things. If you get one thing out of this video, it is open yourself up to other people and other opportunities. Yes, some people are going to hurt you. Other people are going to raise you up, and that's just life. But closing yourself off is a journey destined for failure because the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the numbers, in the surveys, in the questionnaires, in the conversations and interviews. Other people make us happier. Other people are the root of what makes us feel like us. There are people in this book that have made millions of dollars. There are people in this book that have achieved every type of success that you could possibly think of. JFK was one of the Boston boys, one of the Harvard boys, and they still came to the same conclusion. It's not the money you make, it's not the prestige that you gain, it's the relationships that you live with other people. That is what's going to make you fulfilled, or that is what's going to make you feel worthy, happy, and prosperous. Hope you guys liked. I'm going to be doing more book reviews. I have a ton of books to kind of go through and talk about. But yeah, so yeah, 6.5 out of 10. Really good read for the message. If you're looking for a literary experience, this is not it, but it does impact my life on a daily basis. So I would recommend this book to anybody. Thanks, guys.